Hello and welcome everybody to our March Q&A panel for the London Webfest 2021 season. I'm Saul Marron. I'm the festival director here at the London Webfest. Now, as always, with our Q&As, we're going to be talking with some of the best talent on the festival circuit right now. And this time, it's the turn of our student filmmakers. We're joined by directors who are also sometimes producers, sometimes writers, that are previous winners and official selections of the London Webfest. Now, I'm going to be moderating the whole thing as per usual, but don't forget, we want to hear from you as well. You can pose your questions to our panel just by adding them to the chat, and hopefully, fingers crossed, if we've got time, we can get to them. All right, that is enough from me right now. And before we meet the actual panel, as always, I think it's probably best that we take a closer look at their winning work.
Robert, I know that these past few weeks must have been very tough for you, and I imagine that you're tired of hearing this from some people. So I won't repeat the cliche. You just have to move on. Right? Margaret, could you bring in next week's projections, please?
Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes. But I want to know, will it be in my lifetime? Will I be alive in time? See, I've grown up in a world that only loves chocolate when it's coming in a wrapper, or they come and see a rapper. But when you see our ebony skin in the street, you always think that we a strapper. Best believe I see when you pull your purse close and strap her. I'm spitting this phonetically, my words connect kinetically, and I'm not talking hypothetically or theoretically, cause cops really killing niggas unapologetically and unsympathetically. When they yell at me, I think this country gone to hell. You see, they think equality is synonymous to heresy, but honestly, they're angry and just fueled by jealousy.
Simran, sorry, can you please stop being fake? Genuinely, to me, I'm really sorry to do this to you, but it looks like nobody else is gonna actually tell you. Simran and Labonia have been sleeping together. Sorry.
What do you mean, James? Labonia, what is he saying?
Been this whole time just working.
Babe, but I told you I have a lot of things to do, and I excused myself.
Oh, wow.
James, I told you this would happen.
Blaming her.
Why are you turning this on me, Labonia? The fact that you aren't even denying it.
Did he leave?
For the longest time, I thought home was a place. Even moved halfway across the world looking for it. Just to find it in my heart.
What's up, everybody? It's Ash, and this is my voice. What's up, everybody? Everybody, it's Ash. It's Ash, and this is my voice.
This is my voice. What's up, everybody? It's Ash, and this is my voice.
And here they all are. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for the panel.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
Good. Thank you. I've realised some of you have been very patient. Here at London Webfest, we got slightly confused by daylight savings time. It happens here tomorrow for us, but we realised in America that it happened 2 weeks ago. So thank you to all of you who are patient, and thank you to the folks at home who have also been waiting for an hour in some cases. It's amazing to have you all here, and even more amazing after seeing your work. We're always blown away at the festival by the level of work, but in actual fact, I think even more so by student work. We're never short of just shocked at the standard of talent that's coming up through the ranks. So it's just fantastic to have you all here. I think we'll start off quite simply, which is like the audience at home, I know myself, I want to know you a bit better. So just tell us a bit about yourself and the project that you submitted, the work that you submitted to the London Web Fest. We'll start from my left to right. Devansh, we'll start with you.
So hi, my name is Devansh, and I recently made a short film called Exit. So Exit is about everyone who's actually trying to get outside one cycle that they have been stuck on forever. So it's basically about exiting your misery, somewhat stop feeling bad for yourself, and start making an exit from the places that you don't feel comfortable with, or you're still moving on from. So it was a short film made at the end of 2019, and it really connects with me in the term where I was let down in life as well, where I couldn't feel that things will get on moving and I'll be stuck in that place forever. But things get on moving, and we just need to fight it better. We just need to find ourselves in a better position.
Fantastic. Christian, yourself, tell us about your work and yourself.
I'm Christian Rushbrook, and I directed the horror film After Hours. In terms of the story, I wanted to make a film that had about the psychological horror genre, which is something that isn't done a huge amount, because it's usually all like spooky and ghostly and stuff like that instead. So instead, I decided to go a bit more psychological and show how the human mind can really play on everything that you see around you, and the way that you react to things. And a really good source of inspiration for this film was The Shining, and a lot of Stanley Kubrick's and a lot of Wes Anderson's style shooting, lots of centered shots, that kind of thing, just making it look very visually pleasing to the eye, and just trying to keep the audience guessing and on the end of their seat.
Yeah, we'll come back to this part later, but it definitely does. It definitely does invoke that kind of. It's not so much exactly what you're seeing, but what your brain makes up. What your mind fills in the gaps. Ash, yourself, you're award winner from 2 months ago now. Tell us about your work.
Yeah, I'm Ash for Real, the director of Heart Whispers. It's a story about just like rebirth and alignment with myself. I mostly aimed for this to be a story that was a non-medicalized trans story, because most trans stories focus so much on the body and the physical aspect of the changes, but I wanted to focus more on the inner transformation of a trans person and just express the stark change and outlook on life that transitioning has brought to me. So,
I mean, the reason it's an award-winning, not only is it a great film, but you can tell from the get-go it's a deeply personal film that you've put a lot of heart into, and not really you've not held anything back. You've been as frank as you wanted to be, and it definitely comes across. It's just a wonderful piece. Taj, you're up next.
Yeah, I am Taj Kokai, and I'm the director of the Afrofuturistic experimental film titled Woken from a Dream, which recently won Best Student Film, the London Web Fest, and it is about a young Black man who finds himself exhausted by the racial violence and tension that he feels in his everyday life. So he uses a virtual reality headset to try to escape to a better world.
It's, as you can see by the clip we just showed, it is a great use of spoken word poetry mixed with quite current visuals. It's quite something that you get into a rhythm of, and then there's suddenly jarring visuals on, and it's again another deserved winner. Sophia, last but not least, tell us about yourself and your work.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I wrote and directed the short film Tops Off, and we created this film completely on Zoom, via Zoom, and it explores sort of just a group of students navigating a party and a social situation during the pandemic. It kind of just is a representation of where we were and how we were kind of figuring out how to live in this space and kind of make our world as normal as we wanted it to be, even though it was really crazy and really different. And yeah.
It's an amazing ensemble cast. It's we, you know, obviously within the past year, I'm sure we'll talk about COVID many more times before the end of this panel, but within the past year, we've seen more and more, you know, work that is COVID based, that is Zoom based, and finding something that stands out from that is a tricky thing to do. And definitely with Tops Off, it shone far brighter than a lot of works. That it didn't rest on the fact that it was just, hey, it's locked down at Zoom. There was a story behind it, and just an amazing ensemble cast. Lovely to meet you all. Thank you again for all being here, all from different parts of the world. Some super early, some super late, but we're glad you could make it. So how many of you are still studying, and how many of you are any of you? Oh, two hands. I know the rest of you finished your education or fantastic. I'd like to know first off, for those of you who are still studying, we got to lockdown and COVID quite quickly. How has that been? How is learning and making work been for all of you, I suppose, during the past year? How's it changed?
Christian, you can go first.
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks, mate. I'm not gonna lie. Through COVID, there was definitely a lot of issues that we came up against. Obviously, on any film set, there's always going to be issues and things that you have to try and counter while you're on there, because nothing ever goes to plan, as I'm sure everyone here will agree. But I think COVID is definitely a higher level of that incident, and a lot more preparation had to be done. A lot more, you know. It's very hard because obviously, as we're doing now, we're doing everything over the phone or over a meeting, like, you know, a video meeting. So it's can be very difficult to be able to get across to everyone what you want to do and be able to communicate with people properly. However, it has been a very unique experience because it's given us all, I think, an experience which we will never forget, and it's also driven us and shown how much that we can achieve when we really put our minds to it.
Yeah, totally. So when quarantine started back in last March, a year ago, I was actually in pre-production of a different short film. I was like 8 days away from shooting the film, and then quarantine happened. So I go to school in Washington, D.C., but I live in Georgia, so I had to come home to Georgia, and I haven't been back to D.C. since. So I decided to make a different short film, and I shot it all at home with my brother, who is the only actor, and my sister was my assistant director. So it's been a challenge, to say the least, but it's been a unique experience because I've been able to kind of enhance my indie and guerrilla filmmaking skills, since I've had to do a lot of stuff myself with no cast or crew.
That is, I mean, if there's one life skill to learn, guerrilla filmmaking is definitely the way to go. No matter what level you're at, especially with people working with short films and web series, run and gun is something we've all encountered, and just getting to the end of your production, no matter how, is always the goal. It's good to know that was your brother, because you look at the list of credits that you've put on Film Freeway, and it is Taj. Your brother's name, Taj. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work from you, but also a lot of weight to put on one person, and
they did a great job.
Anybody else? How have you found being in the business for the past?
So we made our film also during the pandemic, and I'm from the University of Cape Town in South Africa, and it was also, we were really encouraged by our lecturers to just really think, almost like be creative within the box, within the structure of being safe and being COVID friendly. And I thought that was actually quite a great opportunity in a way. I think it definitely hindered our practical filmmaking experience, because most of my class anyway, we were all over South Africa, and that really was a problem in like terms of our practical filmmaking. But in terms of creativity, I think it really pushed us, and I think that's is a great thing, and I think we're all pretty proud of that.
I mean, you genuinely should be. I think if anyone in the industry has seen lately a lot of the briefs that have come through for content, because everybody is locked down at home in different parts of the world, channels are after new content, but also quick content, cheap content, and a lot of it is based around, you know, kind of like something on Zoom, just come up with it. And that seems like it should be an easy thing. But in actual fact, as you've shown, or as you've just said, there's a lot of casts and there's a lot of kind of moving pieces in your work. And to make that seem flawless, so that you're not even noticing it, you know, that you're not even aware that is a problem is something that I think most people don't think of when they're coming up with a new piece that's set around being online, that's set around group chats. Yeah, it is genuinely an amazing. The more I've watched it, the more I'm kind of like, how are they all? I mean, how much editing is going on here behind the scenes? Because this looks seamless.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Well, you've done very well to hide it.
Thank you.
So speaking of kind of like inspirations of, you know, a few of you have touched on it already, and also working within the remits of lockdown as well. But where, for your current piece, the piece that you submitted to the festival, where did that inspiration come from? Why was that the film or series that you wanted to make? It's free to anyone who wants to answer.
Okay. I can go first if everyone's okay with that. So obviously my film deals with racial tension and police brutality. And in this past year in America, we've hit sort of a boiling point with those. So I took inspiration from those real life events and just the experience of every member of the Black diaspora in America and across the world, because we all are sort of plagued by racial tension and just that violence that we see every day. So that was my main inspiration. And then I actually kind of cited 4 different films, like in my pitch and lookbook. So I took inspiration from Spike Lee's film Do the Right Thing, and then David Diggs' film Blind Spotting, which was directed by Carlos Lopez Estrada. There's a Key and Peele short called Negro Town, which I took a lot of inspiration from. And then there's also a short film called A Virtual Nightmare on YouTube that's directed by this filmmaker named Andrew McMurray that I took inspiration from. So those are where like I kind of pulled my influences from for my film.
It's great to hear you mention Key and Peele, because for what could be passed off as just, you know, kind of like sketch comedy, the influence that I think they've had on people, and also you can see directly their influences as well from other filmmakers. I mean, obviously they've gone on to make award-winning feature films themselves, but they are a masterclass in how to tell the story, how to bring characters out, how to, you know, get an opinion across in a 3-minute short. And especially, you know, obviously we're in a short film festival here. That is definitely key. Anybody else? What was the inspiration for your piece?
I think I just want to say I needed to be my own inspiration, because I didn't really see anything like what I made out there already made. There's obviously trans stories, but like I said before, like it's so much always focus on the physical changes. And yeah, I just there's a really good trans documentary on Netflix. It's called Disclosure. I recommend watching it if you haven't already. But yeah, it talks about how trans people have been depicted throughout Hollywood and just in media in general, and how that's kind of like shaped people's visions of trans people, because most people don't know a trans person, you know, so it all comes through media.
It is interesting to see that. I mean, you're 100% correct in what you're saying. I think a lot of the work that comes through, you know, that gets seen by the general public is the more kind of direct, you know, whereas yours is a relatively soft piece. It has an impact, but there's not a hard line through it. It definitely comes from one person's perspective and one person's kind of like experiences. And I feel like from my side anyway, and I think speaking with other judges, that definitely brings you in and makes you connected to you as a filmmaker, but also, you know, as an audience member as well. There was a quote from you, which I've written down somewhere, Ash, which is, "Your inner voice is always whispering. Sometimes you've just got to dig a little bit to find it." I think that resonated with me so much, to the point I'm saying it now. I don't know about the rest of you, but as a filmmaker, finding that thing that is at the back of your brain, you know, the reason for this question of what is inspiration, bringing that to the forefront, I think is definitely apparent in all your pieces. how has it been for the rest of you? How has it been finding that little nugget of inspiration and seeing it out to fruition, seeing it to completion?
Yeah, I'll go through that. Yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey, obviously, because whenever you see a first draft come out, it never ends up the same way as how you start it. You know, it always changes. You always like improve things, and I think honestly for me, the inspirational side came from a lot of the films that I just know and love. I'm very big on horror myself, so I watch a lot of like films. If any of you have ever seen like Hereditary or anything like that, yeah, lots of things like that. Just like lots of playful uses of light and things like that. You know, not like cliche jump scares, not cliche horror, more tension building instead, which really inspired me to do that because horror, as my tutor reminded me in the pitch when I was pitching it to him, is that horror is extremely hard to do and it's very easy to fall into the cliche traps, even though when you're trying to avoid them. So for me, the inspiration came from a multitude of films. It came from horror films, and it also came from other inspirational directors such as Wes Anderson and Stanley Kubrick, who have done like very centerpiece shots. You know, they're very particular with the shots they used, and that's what I tried to draw inspiration from for After Hours.
Yeah, choosing a clip for your film, it was you know, there was many to choose from, but the one I ended up going for was that is of how do you set up a piece that is tense, that builds, but in actual fact all that's happening is a light turning on. You know, that there's someone is walking into a room, but how do you convey horror without it as you say being a jump scare, especially as horror for decades now has been seen as you know, the lower class of cinema, and for lovers of horror I am, you know, one of them. I've never understood that because for the many different people you've mentioned, you know, there's a masterclass in it if you really want to look. It's not always just a cheap thrill. We've actually got a question from someone, Jean Dunford. How did you arrive at the film titles? Just a little bit of lightheartedness.
Yeah, so I ended up at After Hours, literally just because the film is after hours in a school. And obviously, you know, you want to find, it sounds like really cheesy now, but like back then it was just one of those things that we were just like trying to look through a name. And usually what I do when I'm trying to find a name is I look up different meanings for a word. I go through a thesaurus and I just start looking through the different meanings of what this word could be, like alone or, you know, things like that, isolation, and then just find different words and just be like something that is catchy but makes sense to the film's story. So for this one, it made sense as it was just after hours in a school and it was a horror, so we felt that the film name kind of just stuck.
Anybody else? So how did I'm loath to ask with Sophia because obviously there's a part in your where someone literally does take their top off. Yeah.
So to be honest, you know, I did the typical student thing, and it was working title, what about tops off? And it was like kind of a joke, and we kept kind of thinking of another name. But so, I mean, it is kind of ruining it, but the girl sort of, one of the driving forces is the girl taking her top off on the Zoom call. But I mean, so much, it also is kind of typical of it, like the tops off, so much happens, so much is unfolded, and sort of crazy things happen, and the top's blown, and the lid's off, and the bag of worms comes out. It's all of those things. And to be honest, it's light. It does deal with serious things, but it's lighthearted and it's fun. And there's an exclamation mark because it's just crazy, and that's just I just kind of wanted to like have a fun name that was just interesting, and like
I do have to admit. The film you think you're going to see, or the series you think you're going to see, is not what you see. And also, you know, obviously in this day and age, just having somebody show their, you know, take their top off, even though they're, you know, they are still clothed, I think couldn't have been done better, because in actual fact, it's a minor distraction to something that is something far greater is happening, and rather than that be the center, it's just a throwaway. You know, we've all seen past cinema. We're like, oh, apparently it's just a film where people take their tops off. And this, it was actually really nice to see that build was not the build you're after. It's just a distraction to see. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving on to something, a little less lighthearted. It would be all of these projects are vastly different, it seems, with the amount of people involved. It'd be nice to know, like with Taj and with Ash, it feels like it's a lot more solitary, obviously with your brother Taj. But tell us a bit more about working with teams, both behind the camera, in front of camera. I mean, Sophia, obviously, there's a huge amount of people, a huge amount of cast, on screen. Yeah. But for each of you, how is it working with other people? How is it working solitary? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as I mentioned before, my lead actor was my brother. I'm fortunate enough that he did theater in high school, and he's an actual musician. He goes to NYU right now, where he's majoring in foreign music. So I was able to create a story that centered around spoken word and rap, because it's what he actually does. And behind the camera, it was just me and my sister. My sister was my assistant director and sort of boom operator. So she would hold the boom mic, and I would be the director. I was also a writer and editor and cinematographer. So I'd set the camera and make sure everything was in frame, make sure that I knew how long I needed to film so I could cut in the edit, that kind of stuff. So I had to wear multiple different hats, which was a little bit stressful, but it was nice to have a really consolidated crew and cast, because we shot everything in my house. Like the opening scene and the final scene take place in my bathroom. We shot in my brother's bedroom, in our basement, in our backyards. Everything is in places that we're very familiar with. So it was it was kind of easy in that reason, just because like we all knew each other and we all know where we're filming. So it's easy to set things up and kind of get moving quickly.
And fine working with your brother. There was no.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a fantastic actor. He's a great rapper. So I could trust him to take care of this role and just give it his all. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you saw from the clip, he's the rhythm is definitely there. There's such a nuance to his yeah. Anybody else? Tell us about yourself working with.
We had really incredible actors. So I think what's really cool is that we made this film with 9 actors and I think a crew of 4 people, but we never came in contact with each other at all in person. So everything was done remotely, and honestly, our actors were so committed. We'd spend to create that sort of like to create the ensemble and make it look as though they're sort of just meshed together quite well. We had, I think, a 3-week rehearsal period where every day we'd spend 2 hours just improv. I come from a theater background, so we'd improv, we'd test scenes, and I think a really cool thing was just like we did this one improv session and there was a moment where we realized, the 2 girls were having an argument about race and gender, and they like went really strong in this argument, and then there was just this moment where we were like, whoa, it is kind of like watching a play. Like we've created this room online, or this, when you're filming something, you're like, whew, that was really cool. It was really cool to like create that, and everyone really gave themselves to their little tiny screen. That was really cool. So it was interesting.
I mean, I can't state it enough. The cast for Top is phenomenal. Like just just unbelievably. It's good to know. Or it's nice to hear how that came about, because something was like how are they interact like 9 friends. Like they interact like people you've been on Zoom calls with.
I think it's because we did it sort of as if you're prepping for a play, and then that just really created some camaraderie. Also, a lot of the actors did know each other because they're also from University of Cape Town, but different age groups, and also the pandemic and all that stuff. But it was just, we really wanted to create, because I think sometimes student films, the acting can be a little bit, so it was quite cool to we were just like, we're going to make the acting. I mean, we did full shorts in other places, but we just wanted to create that sense of community. And so it was kind of real, even because we just and we took bits of their personalities and wrote it in, and it was a very collaborative process. And yeah.
Fantastic. Ash, on the kind of other extreme, how did you find it? I'm guessing you are a one-person team. Is this correct?
Yeah.
And so how did you find it all the way through the process of kind of like from conception to filming to, I think probably what it seems from the outside, the hardest part of what to include and how to tell that story?
Yeah, it definitely was a long process, and I probably wouldn't have made this film if it wasn't for the pandemic, because I was starting to really like work with people in person and like do some actual production work. And I already had most of this footage just from my life, and I knew I wanted to do something with it at some point. But then quarantine kind of made me like have to face my stuff and like go in and just like dive into the footage and see what I had. And I had like 5 hours of footage that I started out with, but I ended up with some I think some nice 8 minutes. I'm not sure, but yeah.
I mean, it literally is an award-winning film. So, you know, I think you've done a pretty good job. Exactly. A round of applause.
Thank you. Yeah.
And is there anything you've left on the cutting room floor that you wish you'd included? Is there another like step that you wanted to go, or were you as bare as you think you could be?
Yeah, I was definitely thinking about at first just adding like, because it starts with like the whole story is told through my voiceover. So at least in the beginning, because you don't see me. So it's really like the question, like how obscure do I want to make it, you know? And that comes back to like me not wanting to make it too dramatic and too focused on just like the trauma and the pain that like trans people go through in the world. Like I could have focused on like body issues, like anorexic issues that I've had in the past, and just like self-harm and like all these topics, or just like housing. But like I just wanted to make something that was purely like internal and not focusing on like the societal struggles of like the world, because that's just always talked about so much. So I just left those things out. But I do think now, like after all this time has passed, maybe I should have included that to make it better, just because it's marketable, you know, all that like suffering is marketable. Like
it's that age-old question of why are you making something? I suppose is it for marketability? Is it for, you know, kind of like wider appreciation, wider kind of like views in this day and age? But I would argue that you've made the right decision of a clear story, you know, a clear through line, rather than try and muddy it with like, you know, this is what people want. It's your story. It definitely is your story. Now, in kind of keeping with that, we have another question, which is, if you were to do it again, would you do anything differently? Obviously, Ash, we've just touched on your work. For the rest of you, there's not, you know, we've all been there where you've thought of something, somehow it's in front of you, you're editing it, it's finished, and then you're like, if only. Is there anything that's been left out or that had to fall by the wayside because of constraints?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess I would, if I were to do it again, I'd do it with an actual crew. That way I could focus more on directing the actor, because as I mentioned before, I was really focused on making sure that everything was in frame, making sure the sound was on, the camera was on, that like I had enough space to cut and edit and make sure everything could flow together naturally, which did give me a lot of energy to focus on actually directing the actor and kind of his emotions. So I would do it again with a bigger crew, and then also maybe like a little bit more time to do VFX, because I did this for a class at my film school, and we were on a deadline for when it had to be finished. And I did the VFX myself, and it was my first time doing visual effects. So if I could do it again, I would have liked maybe a little bit more time to kind of perfect those. So that's what I'd do.
Great. Anybody else? Yeah. For a second there, I thought you were like, no, it's perfect. We're done. Nothing I would change.
I think we would have definitely looked at the sound again, and just financially and time strains, we didn't give everyone individual mics. And I think it is in keeping of it being a video call,
Yeah,
but I think it is, we do all agree it could have just bumped it up a little bit. And yeah, but we're also, it is what it is, kind of a, you know.
I think if there was something I had to do again, there was a few shots that in the film that I wasn't actually allowed to shoot, just because we didn't have enough time while on set, and obviously we were dealing with COVID, and things sort of ran over a little bit because we were trying to make sure that everyone was keeping safe and not going near each other, which ended up being a little bit time consuming, a bit more than we were planning for. So in the end, we did have to, I think, out of the shot list, we ended up removing at least 7 or 8 shots from the shot list, pretty much each day. So if I had to do anything again, it would definitely just be I would arrange to have another shoot date. Always pre-plan, over-plan, just like as much as you can, just so you can make sure that things are always going to go wrong, but make sure as little goes wrong as possible. Yeah, if that is a regret I have, like not being able to shoot those scenes, because they would have looked cool.
Sorry, Devansh, you were about to say.
Yeah. So for me as well, on the 3rd day of shooting, actually, it started a bit late. So it started around like 1 hour 45 minutes late. So we had to cut down around like 4 to 5 shots, which were actually really important. But somewhat we managed it without like showing them. But for my final screening for my film school, actually, so we did not go with the cut that I decided, because actually it was supposed to be screened for all the student panel and everyone who was attending the festival at View Cinema. And it was just at that moment was for the sake of it. But later on during the pandemic, it gave me more time to think on the edit. So that's where I think pandemic came into place. They came into action where it gave us so much breathing space to think about how we can change things. So I think Exit is like made in pandemic only because I pieced it together again in the pandemic to actually make the message come across. So I think the last day of shooting, I would just do it again from the beginning. Yeah,
it's amazing to hear. Like, it's a weird thing to say, but all of you have come up with at least one example of positives from the pandemic, and it's nice to focus on that stuff, because I'm the same. I also produce work, and I was working in Australia and had to come back early when the pandemic hit a year ago, and I was literally just sitting there and I was like, I've got a few weeks to a month to work on to add more to a project, and then time passes and you're like, yeah, maybe that scene shouldn't be there, or maybe, it's amazing to have that freedom of time that has not existed ever before. It's nice to hear. It really is. It's kind of refreshing to hear that positives have come from all this. Something I did want to ask, and it kind of excludes Ash and Tash to a certain extent, but I think for student filmmakers, the casting process is something that's slightly daunting, and all of you have it's either a solo project all the way up to 9 people in one given scene. How did you overcome the casting process, and how did you how did you get going with it?
So that was, I think, one of our biggest hurdles in the beginning. It really proved our limitations, because we did casting online, and that was our first introduction to online. And we struggled. We did like a group, so we just sent generic things on our Instagrams into our different theatre and drama courses all over. Personally, I think it's quite important to what I thought, because it's going to be very sort of collaborative and ensemble work that I really wanted to work with trained or people who are training to do drama or acting or dance or something to do with the stage. So we put messages out, and we had these weird group castings, and then the first one was so disorganized and it was really hard. I think that was a big challenge. And then we kind of figured out, okay, we're just going to have me and then the editor in the room speaking to the one person, and also just pretty relentless on that. That's the wrong person. That's the wrong person. And making sure that the person, our creative director, our creative producer, is a working professional, and he gave us really good advice and said, just go with your gut, because you're really going to regret it when you're watching it and you're seeing someone who you didn't want to cast on screen. You're just going to like cringe when you see it. And I'm really happy to say that that never happened, because we were just relentless with this casting. I think I was a bit like, we're going to cast correctly. And I think that was quite it was a challenge, but I think we overcame it in a way.
Most definitely. It's one of those things that one person can let down. One person out of 9 can let down the other 8. Do you know what I mean? Like it's either a team effort or it's not. And everyone has to be working from the same, the same hymn sheet. Christian, what about yourself? Strangely enough, I've actually worked with your lead before. It's such a small world. Yeah, with James Reynard. I was working on a feature with him in Portugal.
He's fantastic. He's
phenomenal actor. Just
he's absolutely brilliant.
Takes his art very, very seriously. But I saw him pop up, and I'm like, James is here doing his very brooding work once again. How did you find it with the casting process?
Well, the casting process, because of COVID, we wanted to get starting as early as possible. We made a casting call sheet. We put it out on social media. We asked everyone to see it. We put out how much we would be paying them. We got a load of people to show up to the auditions. We did them all over video call. We basically made the decision to put the actors together in the same Zoom call so that they could read the script, and then they could traverse off one another, so we could see how the chemistry was between the actors. So that's something we did, and I think getting James, it was definitely a 100%. I was 100% positive as soon as I saw him. And one thing I've always been told when casting, which is some advice that I would love to give, because I wish I had this advice back in the day, is, as Sophia said, go with your gut. And I think in more inclining in the way that they said it was, don't choose someone just because they look like you envision the character. Don't choose them just based off the look. You have to choose them off their acting ability, and if you think they're the best person for this role, like, are they going to be able to carry the film while being, obviously on camera at all times? And that's something that I definitely have regretted in the past, choosing the wrong person because they looked more the part, but they didn't have as good at acting ability.
Fantastic. Devansh, with yourself, you've got an office environment. With people of varying ages. How did you come across those actors?
So actually, like, it was shot before pandemic, so I think rehearsal was very much fun before the pandemic, and I think choosing actors is the most crucial part of, let's say, filmmaking, because they are the characters who are going to play your story out on screen. So you need to be careful about who you're choosing, because it's not mostly like how it will just, that they will look on the screen. It's more about how they'll act on it and how, the emotions will come out from the audience. So you need to make sure that you go with your gut, firstly. And secondly, you have to have the variety of people in audition, because it gives you a lot of content on how to improv as well. Maybe one actor did the improv great but couldn't do the lines, and the other actor did the lines better. So we need to mix it up, and I'm really grateful to the actors that I have in the film. They actually did portray the parts, and it was quite fun doing the improv, because most of the scenes in Exit are somewhat open-ended, because it was up to the actors to end the scene. It's not necessary like I want the scene to end at that particular moment. Sometimes the actors can take it to the next level without even taking it to the next level. So it's mostly I think the way the environment is set on the, like, during a film, during a scene actually. So it brings out a lot of emotions in a lot of different ways. If let's say character A wants something from character B, and there are certain ways to do it. So improv helps as well. So one of the actors on my film set did improv class, so that quite helped to get on with the scenes. So I'm really grateful to them that I got a learning process through the film as well.
Amazing. I think it's testament to how well all your films are doing. You know, like where you are already in early on in your careers. There's a tendency with student films where you're focusing on your craft, where you're focusing on, okay, you know, you're working with your DOP, you're working with your crew, and acting is something that just falls by the wayside, and all this hard work suddenly is ruined because you have the wrong people in front of the screen, or you've not paid attention to how they're interacting and how you're directing them. You know, you're working more on the technical side of it, and I think a lot of the work we see coming through the festival is the skill in students nowadays. The kind of is just phenomenal, because I'm from the old school where, you know, you get everything done and you just point the actor in the right direction and hope that they do their job. And it's definitely not the case with all of you. I've got another question here from Meg Rushbrook. Why did you choose the specific genre you used for your films? But I want to kind of turn that question towards Ash and Taj. So obviously, I think from both your perspectives, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they're very personal projects. I mean, with yourself, Ash, you've won another award, the Barbara Hammer, is that correct, award, which is working towards producing a piece of work that's LGBTQ plus. Kind of, is that the direction you want to go with? Like, what was the inspiration? What is the inspiration past your first piece moving into your next work? And Taj, the same with you. Like, how is this piece moving forward into? Is it going into your next work? I hope that makes sense. It's a bit of convoluted.
Yeah. Ash, you can go first.
We can't both be nice.
Yeah, everyone is so very.
Yeah, I mean,
polite.
I can go. Yeah, so for me, this film, it does help lead into my next film. As I mentioned before, I was in the process of pre-production for another film right before quarantine started. It's a film called More Than a Damsel, which is about sexual assault and overcoming that experience. So this film has really helped me learn more about just the craft of filmmaking and how to direct and things like that. And I'm going to use those in my More Than a Damsel film, which I'll be shooting in the spring of next year, so 2022. So this film has like really helped me just learn more about the craft, the technical side, and just how to direct actors and create very emotional stories, because this was a very personal story for me. Obviously, with everything we've seen with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and everyone who lost their lives, whether it be at the hands of police brutality or just hate crimes in America and all across the world past year and past centuries, it's been very frustrating to see and very disheartening. So I wanted to create a story that just openly expressed the feelings that Black people like myself feel every day that we can't really talk about, because it's not really acceptable for us to it's not really acceptable for us to express our anger and fears and just the trauma we face just living as a Black person in America and in the world. So I want to create a film that kind of expresses those without any filter, in a sense. So it was really helpful and sort of therapeutic to make that film for me.
It was it came at very I mean, the depressing sentence of that was like in the past year and also centuries. You know, that suddenly was just where we've come to is great, but also not even close enough. The last month's festival was very prominent when it came to that. We had 3 award-winning films. We had yourself. We had in the documentary category, Is the UK Racist? Again, talking about, you know, kind of like what voice Black people in the UK actually have, you know, compared to the reality of it, what you think is free and what's not. And then our best short film as well, Wake Up, which was just the simplest of ideas, which is switch the stop and search on its head, have 3, you know, kind of like preppy white boys who are stopped for no reason by 2 Black police officers. And suddenly the stark reality of, you know, it's just phenomenal. But it is, we've had a lot of work come through that is amazing storytelling, you know, getting a point across in a new way so people actually stop and watch and think. Ash, yourself, how is your filmmaking moving forward? How is the influence of doing this film bleeding into your next work, if at all?
Yeah, I definitely aim on making more LGBT themed films, but I don't intend to make it that to make it like the main focus of the film. I want to include like LGBT characters just being like living their lives, even though I'm more so focused on documentary filmmaking. So I think my next piece I'm focusing right now on is just including multiple people that I know here in San Francisco and that are struggling with the issue of intersectionality, that they feel like they can't be one thing and be another thing as well. So I'm Dutch as well. So I moved to America like 4 years ago to like change my whole life around basically. And it made me feel like I can't be trans and Dutch in the same space because it's not like acceptable in, at least in my worldview of how I used to live within the Netherlands. So I'm just trying to focus on that, but include other people and like their struggles of being like Black and queer, being gay and Filipino, being like all these intersecting identities that they feel like can't exist in one space, in one person, you know, but like we are here. So I'm gonna make it.
It's interesting you say that. There's definitely been a focus recently, the past few years anyway, of you know, kind of the argument that we should have more than one Black character. We should have more than one, you know, like if there's a transgender character, then it should be a real transgender. But rather than having to be just one, you know, I watch a lot of Reverie, and Reverie is just, you know, queer content. And you're suddenly like, well, why isn't this across the board? You know, like, why does it have to be in the same way that you made your personal documentary? It's not here's everything. It's here's a storyline. You know, here's a. So it's interesting to hear you talk about Holland like that. I wasn't, you know, obviously we're very close here in the UK. It's interesting to know that it's maybe not that you've moved for a reason. That you've moved for a reason. Something there's a question here. Moving into something a bit different. I'm not sure if you know one of these people, but George Wilkinson wants to know how hard did your producers have to work in lockdown? I don't know if this is a personal dig towards somebody.
It is to me.
So, yeah, how hard did your producers have to work?
Oh, oh God, trying to get back into that. Well, the reason
I make no apologies for stirring stuff up. Like
no, that's fine. It wasn't you. It was him. I'm gonna blame him. He's literally next door, so I'm gonna have a word with him after.
He's watching. You know, we're grateful. We're grateful.
He probably is. But yeah, the reason why he's put that is because unfortunately we were dealt a little bit of a bad hand when it came to our producer. Let's just leave it at that. And it ended up being a series of other people, including myself, having to basically kind of do their job for them, which wasn't ideal, you know, especially during COVID when everything was so time sensitive and everything was like, you know, the schedule had to be ironclad, you know, and everything had to be confirmed like at least like twice just to make sure that we've absolutely got this place to film in, you know, and we've absolutely got the actors. So it was a bit of a stressful time, but we powered through it.
I think the lesson to take away from that is a good team is invaluable. You know, no matter whereabouts you are on the journey.
That's so true.
Yeah. One person, one actor, one producer, one bad person in you know catering can sour it. So finding the right people is definitely key. With that in mind, what would you know? We have a lot of obviously student filmmakers watching this. What would be a piece of advice you'd give to someone who's making their first film, who is, you know, learning the ropes? What's something you learned the hard way, or something that you know you were glad you were told by somebody else?
I think for like people who are creating one of their first films is to just keep it simple. I think rather focus on keep it simple, keep the acting good, I think we try to confuse things a lot and have these crazy stories, but just it might not be on a really award-winning or an Oscar-worthy film, but just your first film, just to make it really simple and just make it good.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think you should also keep it simple in terms of the storyline and also just the equipment you use, because a lot of upcoming filmmakers ask questions like, what camera should I buy? What gear should I get? That kind of stuff. But what's more important is just focusing on the actual storyline and using your film as a learning experience, because no one's first film is perfect. I made a film in high school 4 years ago that I can't even stand to watch anymore because it's just so atrocious.
It's a good lesson to learn. Watch your own
Yeah,
work
it
and be like, oh.
use it as a learning experience and grow and just make connections with different filmmakers and actors, and you can grow as a director, as a writer, producer. You can learn like, oh, maybe next time I can use this adjective to describe an emotion or feeling for an actor. Maybe next time I can cut these scenes out. I can focus more on wide shots as opposed to this kind of stuff. So just learn from it and you'll get better.
Yeah, I think it's very wise advice.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think definitely my advice would be, people talk about when you make a film as a passion project. I'm a firm believer in thinking that if you have the actual say in what happens in the film, if you are writing it and if you are directing it, if you have the say, every film that you make should be a passion project. You should stop yourself and think for a minute when you look at your script, like, yeah, this scene would be cool, but why am I making this? Do I really want to make the rest of this, or am I making it to get this one scene out of it? You know what I mean? So it always comes down to it, and something that my lecturer told me that always stick with me is, whenever you're reading through your script, stop for a second before you do anything else and simplify the story. And if, when you simplify the story, if it doesn't sound good, then you've got more work to do.
Yeah, I think that's very key. Like the first draft or something, when you go through it, and someone's like, "Well, why is this?" And you're like, "Well, because I want it to be." It's like, "Well, that's not a good enough reason to have." You're like, but I want it to be there. Like, it's knowing what your flaws are is and knowing how to edit yourself is a very key component. Ash or Devansh, have you got any top tips for aspiring filmmakers?
Actually, I have one tip. Like, first, you need to learn the rules of filmmaking, and then actually you can break it. Because if you don't know what actually are the rules, like what have already been written by so many great directors, you need to understand that why those rules are there first, and then you need to find a good reason to break it. Because I have broken a lot of rules in my film school, and I've got scolded at so many times. But you need a reason to break that rule. And you need to make sure that whatever actors you're getting on with, whatever storyline you're following it, you need to follow it from your heart. Because like Christian said, there's no point if you're not feeling it.
Yeah. Why are you making it then? You know, like what's the purpose of you being there?
Yeah.
Just passing time. And Ash, what about yourself? Any top tips or anything that you learned the hard way of, of that you can pass on to other people?
I think I would just back everyone by saying, like, make something you're passionate about, and also do some self-reflection on like why you're making it and what is so important about it to you. And yeah, that's so important.
It's been amazing to have you all here. We've got just a few minutes left, so I'm going to finish on what should be an easy question, but I don't think is. Give a film that you have watched more times or love more than anything else, so people out there can go away and look up stuff that may have influenced you. But what's one of your favorite films? It can be something deeply moving or the worst bit of 80s B movie trash. It's always good to know what your favorites are.
Yeah, for me, one of my favorite films, I think it's like my second or third favorite movie, and it inspires pretty much everything I do, is La La Land with Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone. I love that film. And
it was on TV last night,
Yeah, I love the use of color and cinematography. So, like, that's inspired this film, Welcome to a Dream. It's inspired my next film, More Damsel, my first film I made my freshman year. So La La Land is my main inspiration for everything I do. So I recommend that.
Great start. Who's next?
I would say Fight Club, David Fincher. Like, that's the movie I go to whenever I need some kind of motivation or inspiration, because no matter how many times I watch it, I find something new every time. Like, it's on there and I'm doing some work, but it still gets me those chills till date. That at that point, I don't know how he made it, but he made it so apt that, still, like, all of us, we might be going through the same thing and we don't even know it yet. So it's like one of those movies that actually connects with your inner voice, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean nothing to do with the story at all, but the color correction in that film is phenomenal. It's how like great story, great acting, but the color correction is just
Yeah.
Who was next? Who else?
At the moment, a film I watched recently, which I also just watch again and again, is Manchester by the Sea, and I think it's also it's just I don't know how to explain it. But there's that moment where I just feel like your emotions have been and everyone knows the moment, but your emotions have been manipulated so perfectly, and I just think that's beautiful. It's when she's with the pram and he walks to her, and it's just, I feel like you just can't even like heave, and yeah, for me I aspire to make something that's like the equivalent to that moment. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Anyone?
Yeah. My favorite film at the moment is Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan.
Wow.
Anyone has seen that? Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one for me because usually I'm very heavily influenced by story-driven films. But if anyone's seen that film, you will know it's not very story-driven. But
it's visuals.
It's one of those things where it's just a cinematic experience. Because I went to see it in cinema probably about 2 or 3 times, I remember, and I was just blown away by it. I remember just walking out the cinema and just no one said a word to each other. Everyone was just so stumped on just how the film ended. Just love that film. Just love the way that Christopher Nolan works in general, really.
Favorite director?
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Ash, last but not least.
I would say probably Moonlight is a big favorite, just in terms of the nuance and layering and the story, but also obviously the color correction. But also,
I'm not completely obsessed with color correction, but I'm a little bit obsessed with color correction. So, wonderful stuff. I just want to thank you all for being here. We have passed the hour so quickly, and it's great just to have a conversation with you all and learn where your experiences have come from, where your practices and your processes have come from. For anyone at home who hasn't seen their work, if you follow us at London Webfest, you should hopefully be able to see links to their projects, to their Instagram, to their Facebook pages, but definitely go and check out their work. If the 5 of you want to stay in the green room, I'll talk to you in just a little bit. But as we've spent some time with these fantastic filmmakers, I think it's only right that we take one more look at their work. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert, I know that these past few weeks must have been very tough for you, and I imagine that you're tired of hearing this from some people. So I won't repeat the cliche. You just have to move on. Right? Margaret, could you bring in next week's projections, please?
Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes. But I want to know, will it be in my lifetime? Will I be alive in time? See, I've grown up in a world that only loves chocolate when it's coming in a wrapper, or they come and see a rapper. But when you see our ebony skin in the street, you always think that we a strapper. Best believe I see when you pull your purse close and strap her. I'm spitting this phonetically, my words connect kinetically, and I'm not talking hypothetically or theoretically, cause cops really killing niggas unapologetically and unsympathetically. When they yell at me, I think this country gone to hell. You see, they think equality is synonymous to heresy, but honestly, they're angry and just fueled by jealousy.
Simran, sorry, can you please stop being fake? Genuinely, to me, I'm really sorry to do this to you, but it looks like nobody else is going to actually tell you. Simran and Labonia have been sleeping together. Sorry.
What do you mean, James? Lebone, what is he saying?
Been this whole time just working.
Babe, but I told you I have a lot of things to do, and I excused myself.
Oh, wow.
James, I told you this would happen. I literally
Blaming
told you this would
her.
happen.
Why are you turning this on me, Lebone? The fact that you aren't even denying it.
Did he leave?
For the longest time, I thought home was a place. I even moved halfway across the world looking for it. Just to find it in my heart.
What's up, everybody? It's Ash, and this is my voice. What's up, everybody? Everybody, it's Ash. It's Ash, and this is my voice. This is my voice.
What's up, everybody? It's Ash, and this is my voice.
Well, there we go. Another wonderful Q&A panel for the London Web Fest. Don't forget that if you joined late, you can watch the full Q&A as well as all our other industry panels at londonwebfest.co.uk. If you've got your own short film, your own web series, animation, music video, you can enter it now at filmfreeway.com/London Webfest. This month we have the multiple BAFTA award-winning, in fact, guest judge Morag McCannon, who will be viewing all of your amazing work. That's it for me this time. I will see you in a month, but don't forget you can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, all the usual socials. Until then, take care.